I'm your host, Casey Johnson. Don't mind the scruff. We got the Red Sox starting off in the World Series tomorrow night. We'll preview that. Definitely look into it. Also, take a look at past week's NFL action, give you an NBA preview, which we haven't touched on yet this year, and finish up, as usual, with JMS for UMass Athletics. This is UMass Sports Weekly.
This is UMass Sports Weekly.
I farted. Welcome back to another edition. Here to join me at the table to talk a little NFL, Adamo Polzone, Marc Jean-Louis, and Chris Corso. Guys, thanks for joining me. So, first thing we got to cover, Pats Jets. No, it's an interesting topic for us, Chris, especially with you at the table. But it's not the conversation we've been used to in past years. You know, I think we've had a few of these conversations over the years that we've been here that we come in and we're talking about the Pats beat the Jets, usual occurrence, you know? Not this week, unfortunately. 30-27 loss for the Pats in overtime to the Jets. Dom, I'll start with you. Why don't we get a little recap of the game?
Well, the main key factor in the game was definitely Geno Smith. I mean, obviously that penalty really killed New England in overtime, but it shouldn't have got to that point in the first place. Geno Smith really showed the Patriots defense for what they were. Geno Smith could run the ball. He could pass the ball. He was daring. He ran a rushing touchdown. He was the key player in that game for the Jets, and he really exposed the Patriots defense without a doubt. Patriots shouldn't have let it get to that point, but with the new addition of Andre Carter, I think the Patriots are going to be more prepared in the future. And, we'll see how it goes from there. But bad game for the Patriots in my book.
Yeah, if I could just add on to that, absolutely. It was just statistically not there for the New England Patriots at almost any point during the game to see. I mean, actually, to take that back, it's like, yeah, they got out to a 21-10 point lead at the halftime. But then after that, I mean, you know, the offense, they just got decimated by the Jets offense, 20-6 going into the second half. I mean, you look at Tom Brady's numbers. He completed 48% of his passes. That's not used to the numbers that we're used to seeing from Tom Brady. Absolutely not. And, like, third down conversions, they only completed 1 out of 12 third downs. I mean, absolutely. I mean, in the game, like, when you're only going to complete, like, 8% of your third downs, that game is yours to lose, absolutely. There's no way you can win in that league with third down numbers that bad.
Chris, what'd you catch in this game?
I agree, guys. I think Geno Smith actually outplayed Tom Brady. I'll repeat that one more time. Geno Smith outplayed Tom Brady, which was very surprising to see. You said he had 2 touchdowns throwing, 1 on the ground, threw for over 200 yards. He really showed that he can win a big game for the Jets, and this was a win or probably no chance of winning the division for the Jets if they didn't win this game. And now they're just 1 game back of the Patriots, who were undefeated a couple weeks ago. So to see the Jets rebound like this after losing Sanchez at the beginning of the year could have been a blessing in disguise. I definitely think so. So I would much rather have Geno leading my team with that defense than have Mark Sanchez the way he led that team last year. He's definitely less turnover prone, even though he still has some issues to figure out when it comes to throwing interceptions and controlling the ball. But I like Geno Smith much more with this team than I like Mark Sanchez, and I think that injury was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, this could be one of those victories for the Jets that we're looking back, maybe not necessarily at the end of this season, but maybe in future seasons as Geno progresses, that maybe this is a keynote victory for him that could really skyrocket his career future, because he's definitely proved more, I think, than what most people were expecting coming into the season. Done 500 record. I don't think many people would see that 6 weeks in. And to beat the Patriots for the first time in 7 games, I mean, that's a big deal as a Jets quarterback. So interesting to see how Geno will react with this win and see if he keeps that level of play. Another person's level of play I know a lot of people had an eye on was Gronkowski making his return and had a good game. He had, I think, 8 receptions, some around 150 yards in that area. So it was a Gronk-esque game. Didn't get his red zone touchdown people were looking for. Chris, what did you see out of Gronk in this game?
Well, the thing with Gronk was Tom Brady is obviously lacking some receivers this year. As we know, Amendola got hurt the week before with a concussion. No Wes Welker, no wide receivers when it comes to all the injuries. So we saw in the game against the Jets, Tom Brady was getting the ball, and he was looking right at Gronk every time. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but
Absolutely.
it was
hard not
very
to.
it was hard not to. It was
Targets.
pretty obvious that he was looking towards Gronk pretty much every time that they were throwing the ball. So this is definitely going to benefit Gronk when it comes to fantasy numbers. So keep him in your lineups, of course. He's definitely healthy enough to be one of the top tight ends in the league still. And he's going to get those targets every week. He's in and out. He's going to get those targets because, as we know, there's not enough options for Tom Brady right now when it comes to wide receivers.
I really think you guys are giving Gronk a little too much credit. Yeah, he had a good game for a normal tight end, but this is Rob Gronkowski, and he's one of the highest paid athletes in the game. So the Patriots aren't paying him to have a good game, to have a 114-yard game. They're paying him to get the touchdowns and to make those big plays. He should have easily have gotten over 150 yards last game and a touchdown. He dropped 2 or 3 balls. One of them would have ended up as a touchdown had he caught it, but he said the sun was in his eye. You know what? It's part of your job. The ball touched both your hands. You're supposed to catch it, especially if you're Rob Gronkowski. I understand he's a little rusty coming back, from that surgery. He's a mess, from his forearms to his back, everything. But at the same time, you're ready to play. You got cleared to play. Do your job. If you don't do your job, you're out. Obviously Gronk's not out. He played a good game, and as far as fantasy-wise, he gave everyone 11.4 points, which is great for a tight end. But at the same time, this is Rob Gronkowski, and he needs to really step up.
Now, Mark, do you think that after this week, Gronk is going to continue to progress, or do you think maybe we're seeing an injured Gronk play right now?
Well, definitely. You take a look at what happened to Gronk. It definitely looks like 5 back surgeries and a couple of nuts and bolts in his arm right there. But, definitely what you saw from Rob Gronkowski this week, again, with the 8 catches for 114 yards. Yeah, he should have had that touchdown. Yeah, it was a very hard pass, to just jump up and, reel it in with one arm. But honestly, this is a lot farther along, I think, Rob Gronkowski. Honestly, I didn't think he was going to be this far along in his recovery. Yeah, he should have had that touchdown, but honestly, it's quite a lot. It's
Yeah, it was still a good performance. I got to admit, Damo. I think you're being a little
good
harsh
performance for an
overall.
average tight end.
That's 6 weeks out. He's coming back. Getting back into the swing of things. So I absolutely, I agree. It's with the tight end performance we're seeing in this day and age. That is a pretty average performance, especially from Gronk. Excuse me, but first week back. Give the guy a break. We'll see how he plays.
We'll see how he plays next week.
We will. We will
still
indeed.
a long season left to go ahead of us.
Moving on, Broncos no longer undefeated. Not sure we thought we would say this early in the year with how that offense has been playing, but Peyton's old team, led now by Andrew Luck, able to overtake them, and really a great game. I'd say one of the games of the year so far. So with that being said, and we still have the unexpected Chiefs at 7-0. Mark, I'm going to start with you. Are the Broncos the best team in the NFL still?
It's really a give and take. Given what the Broncos have been able to do this season, yes, they have the most explosive offense in the league. They're easily closing in on 300 points right now, and only through about 6 or 7 games. That's a pace that's almost unheard of this day in the NFL. But you look at the Kansas City Chiefs. You definitely got to give it to them. They have been absolutely phenomenal so far this year to start off the season at 7-0. That game against Houston. They had the third-string quarterback, Case Keenum out of Houston. Houston. They almost lost that game. They only won that game 17-16. But it's a really tight, it's a very close race in the AFC West right now. You definitely got. It's a toss-up right now. I can tell you right now.
Yeah, it's some good football. Chris, do you see the Broncos as the top team in the NFL still?
You really can't argue against the Broncos being the best team in the NFL, but you got to look at the Colts. I know they lost Reggie Wayne this week, which was big, tore his ACL. Real big. He's one of their top targets, especially for Andrew Luck. They've had a great connection. But when it comes to Andrew Luck, you see he knows how to win games. And in his start, he had, I think it's 22 starts in the NFL so far. He has 8 comeback fourth-quarter victories. That is an unbelievable stat. So for Andrew Luck to keep showing that he can win and to show that Peyton Manning-esque type of fourth-quarter play, I really think with this team and the defense that they have a very strong secondary. Chuck Pagano, I think, in my mind, is one of the best coaches in the NFL. So this team as a whole, they know how to win. They played Seattle tough the week before, and now they beat the Denver Broncos. I think that this team is definitely one of the best teams in the AFC. Definitely top 3 in the AFC.
Yeah, so. Andrew Luck is really starting to prove himself as maybe the most all-around quarterback when you throw in running and passing. Now, we got guys like Kaepernick who are clearly faster, but Luck is such a better passer than Colin Kaepernick is. He's
I
one of the
agree.
best passers in the league, and he moves better than Peyton. He moves better than Brady.
His rushing ability is the most underrated part of his game.
Exactly.
No one realizes.
He had 100 yards against the Broncos.
They talk about RG3. They talk about Russell Wilson. Nobody talks about this guy. He has shown that he can. He ran the ball into the end zone last week, and he's shown that he can move. He's a fast guy. He did it in college, and now he's doing it in the NFL, and that is the most underrated part of his game because you have to cover that, and then he'll beat you along with the long ball with guys like T.Y. Hilton, and he had Darius Hayward-Bays coming along as another option for him to throw to. So I really like the way he's been playing, and I think that the Colts are a team to be reckoned with.
You know, I feel with RG3's decline in rushing big time and Kaepernick's decline in rushing, I think you're going to start hearing a lot about Andrew Luck and his rushing ability.
And it's about time we do.
Yeah, and like you said, it was a fantastic Sunday night game, probably the best one so far this season, probably will be the best one all season. But at the same time, the Colts had a fire burning in them, and Peyton was coming back home, and they wanted to let everyone know it's still the Colts' house. It's Andrew Luck's time now. Peyton's gone, time to move on. So it was a great game, but as far as are the Broncos still the number one team in the league, yeah, you have the Chiefs at 7-0, but at the same time, they barely beat the Houston Texans, who don't have a quarterback. They beat them by 1 point. So I still think the Broncos are number one, without a doubt. When you got a guy like Peyton Manning throwing to Wes Welker, Eric Decker, Julius Thomas, and, you know, two of those guys can be hurt and you'll still have a solid team, you're good.
Yeah,
Broncos are definitely number one.
We know that offense is scary. I want to get back to your point you just made, though, about because this has been a lot of the argument going into that game that, you know, oh, the Colts have Peyton coming back in, so they have this fire burning. You had Irsay saying some really controversial comments about Peyton, about how they're happy they made that move even after all this, and you know they kind of good riddance with Peyton Manning. You don't think Peyton had some serious emotions burning in his belly too? You know, coming back into that game.
He did, but I guess he didn't know how to play it. I guess he didn't know how to play it. I guess the fire was burning more in the Colts than Andrew Luck.
Yeah, I guess that, and that defense too. That defense played some.
That defense is very underrated. No one really talks about the Colts defense. That secondary, they have a bunch of guys who can cover. You saw they held Peyton Manning to that was his lowest point total of the season. So they really have shown that defense has shown that they can contend with the best teams in the league. They did it against the Seahawks. They didn't win that game. The Seahawks won and pulled it out, but they've shown they put the two toughest teams, I think, in the NFL the past 2 weeks, and they've came out very great, and they look like they're stronger than ever right now. So.
To sum up what you just said, they pretty much just shown that Peyton Manning is immortal. He's not immortal.
He bleeds.
He bleeds.
He bleeds.
It can happen.
That's good to see. Well, as this year progresses, I guess the Colts are definitely going to be one of the teams to watch. Losing Reggie Wayne, brutal, but definitely fun to watch that team. Real quick, just to wrap up, I want to touch on the Brendan Merriweather suspension. This guy's been in the news for the past 3 years about bad hits. Finally got rid of his money, and they suspended him 2 games instead of fining him. Dom, I'll start with you, then just go down the line. What do you guys think of the suspension?
Honestly, Brendan Merriweather, he's just not a good player overall, and it's starting to show. His numbers are declining. His interception numbers are declining. He didn't have any last season. He only has 1 so far this season. He's on pace for 2 or 3. His tackles have dropped. Everything's dropping. So he's doing all these hard hits. He's making all these dirty plays just to still be in the game. Because you know what? He's really not that tough. He's kind of got a small frame. So, yeah, you know, he's probably not going to be in the league after this contract runs out next year.
Mark?
Yeah, I think, as soon as, not maybe as soon as Brandon Merriweather got drafted into the league, but very soon after that, we all started to see that Brandon Merriweather was a very overrated safety that, can get exposed in one-on-one coverage when it really comes down to it. And especially in a league where they're really enforcing player safety, where they're saying you can't make these cheap shots to the helmets like that. What's the name that you keep hearing in the news more and more every single time about cheap shots? And I'm with Brandon Merriweather. I think it's a very well-deserved suspension. We'll see how his career goes from there. But honestly, I don't think it's going to go very well for him at all.
Chris?
I think he'll be gone pretty soon when it comes to Bill Belichick at the head. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to be he definitely is going to be gone soon. I think Bill Belichick gets all that bad blood out of the clubhouse, and I think he'll be gone soon.
We'll see how they respond to this action that we are pretty comfortable, not I should say comfortable, but pretty adjusted to seeing because it's happened so many times over the past few years. Guys, thanks for joining me. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back to preview the World Series. Welcome back to UMass Sports Weekly. Now rejoining me and joining me at the table to discuss the 2013 World Series, Chris Corso, I missed you, Chris Potomatis. So, guys, didn't think we'd be here talking about the World Series. As Red Sox, I'm kind of looking past you, right? You can lean back right now. There's a bit of a celebration thing. You just kind of hear. No, but in all honesty, especially going up against the Tigers, I don't think we saw Red Sox winning that. And I don't think a lot of people saw the Cardinals doing the damage they did to the Dodgers as well. So this repeat of the 04 World Series is really going to be something interesting. Chris, what did you see? Oh, actually, I can't do that. I got two Chris's up here. Chris Potomatus. What did you see in the Red Sox during the Tigers series that you like to fall over to the World Series?
Well, I started a team that just never gave up and always stayed into the game until the final out, which is basically what they did over the course of the regular season. You talk about the game, game one, they have no hits through the first 9 2/3 innings that navigates a base hit, and you think, okay, we have life. And then game two, you're down 5-1, which against Scherzer, nothing going on. Ortiz has a classic Ortiz postseason moment, grand slam first pitch, which I thought Toriano had a chance to catch because he was tracking that one down. But basically, this team never just quit. They always kept battling. This team was struggling to get hits, but they just kept preserving. They kept playing it out, waiting it out, and they were able to jump on a few Tigers mistakes, and they had the clutch hits in the game.
Chris, now from the other side, what have you seen in St. Louis during the NL? Excuse me. I've got different sports all jumbled up. What did you see from them that you could see rotating over to the World Series and helping them out?
Well, Casey, this team in St. Louis, they always seem to just sneak into the playoffs and sneak into the World Series. But this year, they were obviously one of the best teams in the National League. No Pujols, no problem. And the biggest thing I've seen out of them was the pitching. And Adam Wainwright has proven it over his 2 World Series wins with the Cardinals. And now they have a second guy, no Chris Carpenter this year, but they have this guy named Michael Wacha, and he has been a stud for them, 2-0.
Unreal.
He has under a .5 ERA in his 2 starts. He won 2 big games for them against the Dodgers. And we all know when it comes to the postseason, you got those big bats in your lineup, but it's all about pitching. And when you got these 2 guys at the top of your rotation, that's why they beat the high-powered Dodgers. And that's pretty much would sum up the series, is those 2 guys at the top of the rotation for the Cardinals.
Wacha has been one of the more exciting stories of this postseason because he was relatively pretty much
quiet
unheard
during
of.
the season,
yeah, pretty quiet, and then he gets in the postseason and starts doing work on the Dodgers. Now, on the other side of this, we know we've seen some fantastic pitching from the Red Sox that we kind of were looking for during the regular season. Now, don't get me wrong, it was there. That's the other, to bring back Adamo's point, the greedy New England fan.
Yeah, exactly.
But that is, it wasn't with the pitching staff we had. We didn't see them play up to par. Now we got Lackey performing like he did, which was a great performance. How do you see this pitching staff going into the World Series? Do you think it can maintain this playoff performance that they had? Do you think it could catch up to them a little bit because it has been such a long road?
I think the Sox starters should be pretty good in this series. There isn't the powerhouses that Detroit has, but at the same time, St. Louis has a lot of guys who have clutch hits. As a team, they're only batting .210, but they have a lot of clutch hits, and Carlos Beltran is the epitome of that. He only has 10 hits all postseason, but he has 12 RBIs. He has more RBIs than base hits, which shows you that when he's getting up at the dish with guys on base, he's delivering. But John Lester has looked great in his 3 starts this year. The one loss came in a 1-0 game, so you really can't blame him for that one right there. John Lackey he went pitch for pitch with Justin Verlander in Game 3, I think it was. Yeah, Game 3. So that right there was outstanding. Clay Buchholz struggled in the first game against the Tigers, but bounced back. And Jake Peavy, the big thing here, I think, will be that he's now pitching against a National League lineup, and he pitched in the National League for a lot of his career. So if he can have that National League success in Game 4 in St. Louis, I think that'll be huge for this team. And certainly they have the talent. I think it's just a matter of execution. But based on what I've seen so far, I think they will continue.
Now, we have seen plenty of talent in the pitching, like we said, and in the offense. You mentioned Beltran. Chris, as an out-of-town opinion, when you're looking at Beltran and David Ortiz, with the way you got the history of Ortiz and his clutchness, and the history of Beltran, Mr. October, and how he's been playing this postseason, who do you want in the heart of your lineup in this World Series?
I'm sorry, but the heart of my lineup, I got to go with David Ortiz. It's just, you can't argue against it. That team was dead in Game 2 of the ALCS. Down 1-0, down 5-1 in the 8th inning, 2 outs, and he gets up with the bases loaded. As much as you hate to say it as a New Yorker over here, David Ortiz is one of the clutchest hitters in postseason history, you have to say. So having him in the middle of my lineup is definitely a plus when it comes to the World Series. And you look at the Red Sox, they've won 8 World Series games in a row. The past 2 World Series they've been in. They swept the Cardinals back in 2004. So you look at the Red Sox and you can't help but think that this may be their year. So when it comes to this is as evenly matched of a series as you'll ever see. The teams had the same records in the regular season. They both won in Game 6 of the ALCS. So you look at these two teams, both have great pitching, both have that big bat in the middle of the lineup. I think it's going to be a great series, and I think it's definitely going to go to 6 or 7 games.
I'm hoping history repeats itself and we keep it at 4. A nice sweep, have the shortstop ground out to the pitcher, let it all replay itself, you know. Yeah. Another big thing with these two teams, you talked about basically the equivalence of these teams. A lot of ways they're very the same. And another way that they're very the same is in coaching as well. And Mike Matheny and John Farrell. John Farrell came up, just won Manager of the Year for the AL. I don't know if Matheny won it. I know he was up there as one of the top.
I haven't heard yet.
I heard Farrell won it. I don't know for sure about Matheny, but regardless, he is one of the top in the NL. And the way these two coaches have turned these teams around, it's just a pretty remarkable story that they're back facing each other. Chris, I know we have probably some bias towards Farrell. You know, we've had him around, we liked him, but it's really hard to deny Mike Matheny as a coach. He's a fantastic coach. Which coach would you rather have for a team in the long run?
In the long run, I think Farrell has more experience because, you know, if you look at Mike Matheny, he was a player very recently. At least Farrell has the pitching coach experience, has the managerial experience now. So I think I would go him long term. But I mean, either way, you can't go wrong. I mean, what Matheny has done with that line. I mean, they lost Pujols, they've lost Carpenter, and they still find themselves in the World Series. I mean, how many teams can do that? I mean, I'm sure that it's a franchise thing too. You have other guys stepping up. I'm sure the GM's doing a great job. But to get your players to play hard after losing these big names in your lineup every day, you know, it's impressive. And like I said, you know, I think either way, you really can't go wrong. I mean, I love Farrell. I love the move when they got him here. I mean, either way, I think these are two great managers that are just going to help their teams immensely.
Both teams playing some real money ball. Chris, what do you see in the managers?
Absolutely. There was a great article in USA Today about these two managers and how they're the new school of managers in the MLB. And there were tons of interviews at the media day today. Tony La Russa and all the old managers saying they were young once. All these guys were young managers at one time. And now these two guys are starting the new trend of the new school managers, guys who were players, guys who were pitching coaches, young guys who can relate to the players real well, which both of these coaches have proven. So, I mean, you see the improvements. You definitely see the improvement in the Red Sox. Bobby Valentine obviously didn't have what it takes to control the team. This guy pretty much had the team under they pretty much created a whole new identity this season, despite that awful turmoil last year with Valentine. So when you have a coach who can relate to the players, and he's done it himself, he's been there himself. John Farrell has had experience with these guys in the past, so these two coaches have really shown that a younger manager can do it in the MLB as well. It's not all about experience. It's about how you can relate to your players and how you can get them to play as hard as they can out there for you. And these two managers have definitely shown that when it comes to this season.
Yeah, they definitely have the respect of all their players, which is some teams you can get. You know, you have the team's overall respect, but then you have your one or two guys that These two teams, you got all the way through. You know, they're completely bought in with these coaches, and
exactly.
It's good team morale on both sides. It is. I agree. I think it's going to be a great series. As much as I'd love to see a sweep, you know, the quicker the parade, the better. But I think it will be a great series for certain. With that being said, Chris Corso, I'm starting with you. What do you got the series finishing at?
I'm going to say it's going to go 7 games, and I like the Red Sox in 7, as much as I hate to admit it.
This is the most pro-Boston conversation I think we've ever had.
I agree,
I'm loving every minute of it.
To be honest, I think that it's just it's their year. I really believe that. I didn't believe it through halfway through the season. I didn't believe it through 3/4 of the way through the season. But after the ALCS, I mean, they turned
2 grand slams. I mean, there's something there.
They turned me into a believer. With that being said, their offense needs to be more consistent in this series than it was in the last series, because they had some droughts that many people don't realize because they had the 2 big grand slams. But if the offense can be as consistent as they were during the regular season, I think with the pitching, and they have Koji Uehara in the bullpen, he's been lights out. He's been the shutdown closer that
MVP of the ALCS.
Exactly, MVP of the ALCS, MVP of the playoffs for the Red Sox. So when you have him at the end and you have the starting pitching, John Lester has had the experience. So I think that this team, with the big bats in the middle of the lineup, I think they're going to get it done in 6 or 7. I'm going to say 7 games. It's going to be a great series.
Yeah, I mean, their offense, like you said, quietly pretty terrible during that time this
exactly.
series.
Not
Almost got no hit twice.
Yeah. Yep.
Brutal average, enormous amount of strikeouts.
And still found a way to win.
And, they found a way to win. But World Series is a whole different ballgame, and come World Series against the Cardinals, if they're going to come out and get no hit by starting pitching and pray for terrible relief pitching again, it's not going to work out that great for them. Chris, you got a sweep? What do you got for us?
I have Sox in 6. I think they clinch it. And I would love them to clinch at home and go hopefully in Game 6. I don't want a Game 7. No one wants a Game 7. But I think this is a team that I think they're just a little better than the Cardinals. I think they have a little more star power, a little better proven pitching. When you look at the Cardinals pitching, Waka, you don't know. So far he's been unstoppable in the postseason, but does that catch up? You look at guys like Joe Kelly and Lance Lynn. Can they preserve what they've been doing so far this postseason? I think there's more question marks for the Cardinals. I think the Sox are a little more proven, but I think one big thing to look at with the Sox this series is Xander Bogaerts. In the ALCS, he was, I think in the playoffs in general, he's 3 for 7 with 3 doubles, 5 walks. He has an OPS of 1.727. That's unbelievable. So I think he's a guy to look at. He's obviously played his way into the starting lineup at third base. That's going to be huge. And one thing to look at for the Sox in St. Louis is that Mike Napoli is their first baseman. Farrell said that Ortiz is playing first base, which means that Napoli will be a pinch hitter and not in the lineup. And he was hot in the ALCS. He caught fire, had that big home run against Verlander, had a home run, I think it was Game 6 as well. So, he started to get hot, and that's a bat that's hard to have out of your lineup. But overall, I think Sox and Sixers, I think they're the slightly better team, but this should be a phenomenal series like we've seen the past 2.
Yeah, 0-4 and 0-7, both clinched on the road. Would be nice to see this one clinched in Fenway. 18, I don't know where that one was clinched. I wasn't around, so I'm worried about 13 for now. Guys, thanks for joining me. We'll be excited to be following this World Series. Definitely catch up on it next week. Stay tuned. We'll be right back to talk an NBA preview.
Before the UMass field hockey team took on St. Joseph's at Garber Field on Sunday, the team held its Senior Day ceremony, where they honored their 6 seniors, Lindsey Bowman, Alyssa Einesen, Molly McDonnell, Hannah Prince, Alexis Akalis, and Mel Sutherland. All 6 got to start the game as the Minutewomen came in hoping to stay undefeated in Atlantic 10 conference play. The seniors made an immediate impact as Prince scores on a penalty corner shot 13 minutes in to put UMass on the board. But the underclassmen weren't left out as freshman Nicole Miller grabs a loose ball and puts it into the net to give the Minutewomen a 2-goal lead. 2 minutes later, Bowman tips in a pass from Sakalis to give UMass a 3-0 lead going into halftime. In the second half, Charlotte Verhelst scores not 1, but 2 goals within 2 minutes of each other for the freshmen's first multi-goal game of the season, giving the Minutewomen a 5-0 lead 3 minutes into the half. Then Brooke Sabia came out and added a pair of goals of her own to extend the UMass lead to 7-0. St. Joseph's finally got on the board 56 minutes into the game as Emily Nonemacher floats this shot over the head of Sam Carlino to give the Hawks their first goal of the game. But UMass struck right back as Brooke Sabia scores again off this pass from Maria Jose Rodriguez to get her first hat trick of the season. McDonnell provided the final tally for the game, becoming the 3rd senior to score in the game and giving the game a final score of 9-1. After the game, Coach Carla Tagliente talked about what it meant to get to honor the seniors for Senior Day.
They're an outstanding group. They have all 6 of them have given a lot to the program and really grown up a lot. And they're 6 great young women, and they've all had outstanding seasons to date. And to have the opportunity to honor them and just recognize them is special, especially here at home, and to get them all on the field at the same time. It's definitely not the last time they're going to be playing together, so it's kind of weird feeling because there's no finality in it at all, but it's just nice to have the opportunity to recognize them.
Welcome back to UMass Sports Weekly. Now joining me at the sports desk to preview the NBA season, Jess Levinson and Joey Sade. Guys, thanks for coming to the desk. Now, first thing we want to touch on, I always like to cover the most obvious stuff. We'll get that out of the way. Miami, obvious number one, coming into the season. It's well known, blah, 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 blah. What we really want to worry about is who the biggest threats are to Miami coming in this season, mostly because the Celtics aren't one and they usually are. Now, we'll focus mostly on the Heat. We know we got some powerhouses in the West, but we're going to worry about the East for now. Joey, I'm going to start with you. Who is your biggest threat in the East this season for the Miami Heat to take the East crown?
Well, Casey, I think talking about the Eastern Conference, there's 3 legitimate teams that have a shot. I think you have the Chicago Bulls, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Indiana Pacers. The Chicago Bulls because Derrick Rose is coming back. Indiana because of what they did last year, bringing Miami to the 7-game series in the Eastern Conference Finals. And Brooklyn because of what they did in the offseason, adding Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. I think I'm going to take Brooklyn for the top team if that team can stay healthy. Mm-hmm. And, we always talked about the Celtics. If Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce can stay healthy, then they will continue to be the top threat to Miami. I think that shifts to Brooklyn because when you look at Brooklyn's lineup, I think, again, when they're healthy, they probably have the best starting lineup in the East, maybe the entire NBA. Mm-hmm. And maybe that doesn't mean anything because we had that with the Lakers last year and we saw how that went.
It's true.
But I think you look at the balance of you got Deron Williams, Joe Johnson, you bring in Pierce, you bring in Garnett, and you still have Brook Lopez. So those are, first of all, 3 all-stars on your team, in Lopez, Williams, and Johnson. Then you bring in 2 future Hall of Famers who are, yes, they're on the end of their careers. They're on the wrong side of 30. We all understand that. But they don't have to, bring as much as intensity in play as they did when they played in Boston. The shoulder, the weight is not on their shoulders as it was in Boston. You got Deron Williams, who's one of the best point guards in the entire NBA, I think, top 2 in the East, him and Derrick Rose. And you got Joe Johnson, who's one of the best shooting guards in the Eastern Conference as well. And you got Brook Lopez and Kevin Garnett down low, who can dominate Miami, who they picked up Greg Oden. But, is he going to play this year? Is he going to be a factor if he doesn't get hurt? That's obviously their biggest weakness. Miami is a down low post, as Indiana exposed that last year. And also their weakness is defending the point guard, which Deron Williams is one of them. And he's going to get better with the addition of the new offseason acquisitions.
A lot of egos you mixed in there in that pool, and we've seen the big 3 and that worked out, but they were surrounded by Perkins and a young Rondo. It wasn't these super teams that we saw in the Lakers where you get established players mixed with guys that are future Hall of Famers. We don't really know how this is gonna work out. The only sample size we have is the Lakers last year to go off, and that's not a very good outcome, but it's on paper they are one of the best teams, and they could be one of the best teams, like you said, if they can stay healthy. Jess, who do you got for your biggest threat to the Heat?
I got another team that's adding an all-star player this year. It's the Chicago Bulls, who have Derrick Rose returning, probably the most explosive athlete in the league when he's healthy. He took an entire year off, so he's going to be totally healthy, we think. And the Bulls, from 2010 to 2011 and the 11 to 12 seasons, best regular season team in the NBA. And last year, they didn't have that success, obviously, without Derrick Rose. They only won 45 games, but they still played really well. A really important factor into that season was that Joakim Noah and Jimmy Butler and all their other players, they had to take on the responsibility that Derrick Rose left behind. So they get a lot of experience from that. They can help even more in the playoffs now. Jimmy Butler broke out last year, showed himself to be an extremely capable defender, especially on LeBron or D. Wade. Joakim Noah was a frontrunner for Defensive Player of the Year. He also took some great responsibility for that team. And all their players are just great role players that can help D. Rose come back, be healthy. Tom Thibodeau, he's one of the best coaches in the NBA. And the players take on his mentality, which is a never say die attitude. And they showed that against Miami and Brooklyn in the playoffs last year. So I think they're going to do very well, definitely compete with Miami this year.
Chicago definitely hoping for a breakout year from Taj Gibson as well. That's one guy they're really hoping will step up. Hasn't really broken out of his shell yet, but a lot of potential is there. Hopping over to the West now, we have some powerhouses up there. No clear cut. I think some might argue the Thunder are the clear cut best. But, it's really a more mix of teams over there. Joey, do you have the Thunder? Am I correct?
I think, Casey, when you talk about the West, it's probably the first year in a while that it's so up in the air. You got the San Antonio Spurs, who I don't have to remind you that they were 5 points and 26 seconds away from being the NBA final champions. So maybe we wouldn't even be having this discussion if they closed out that Game 6.
That's true.
So they would be the champions, and they'd be heading in with similarly the same team as they are. And I'm going to take the San Antonio Spurs. And I don't want to sound cliche, but they still do have Duncan, Ginobili, and Parker. And until those three show signs of disintegrating, even though I do believe Ginobili did show that in the finals last year. There was times where he did not look himself and he looked old. But Duncan played better than he did 2 years ago. Last year, he had one of his best seasons of his career, and that showed in the playoffs. You still have Tony Parker, who's one of the best point guards in the entire NBA, and you still have Greg Popovich on that sideline, who's going to coach that team to play right at the right time, like he always does. And they, with their aging stars, they do have those role players who come in and step up. Those no names which nobody knows about entering the season and during the season, and they still come back and beat teams. So I think the San Antonio Spurs, all around, they play the best all-around basketball, both offense and defense. They're disciplined on both sides of the ball. You still have Popovich, who I think is the best coach in the NBA, and you still have Duncan and Ginobili and Parker. So I think the Thunder, they still have Kevin Durant, obviously, which is arguably the second best player in the entire NBA behind LeBron, obviously. And you have Russell Westbrook, who's also one of the better point guards in the entire league. But, he's going to be missing the first few weeks of the season. So we don't know how the Thunder are going to start off and gel. They lost James Harden 2 years ago, and they haven't really found someone to replace him. So I think the Thunder are still a question mark. What about you, Jesse?
I would say that the team on the upswing, younger, getting better, are the Clippers. So I would have to disagree with that because I think the Spurs are getting older. I think that they're not going to have guys break out the same way every year like they got lucky last year. The Clippers, instead, they actually revamped basically their entire bench. They got great backups at every position. I think their backups could actually beat the Charlotte Bobcats or the, it's pretty bad how bad the Bobcats are. But
I think we could get 5 people from the studio room in there. Might be able to take the Charlotte Bobcats. Yeah, I could take them.
And you have Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, still very young players who are, people forget how young they are, probably 24 years old. They're improving. Reports out of preseason are that their free throws are getting a lot better, which is huge for them. Chris Paul, always extremely motivated. He's very intense, get those guys going. Doc Rivers is going to be great for them too. He's bringing that championship pedigree with defense-first mentality, responsibility on the court. And something that might be overlooked that he can bring to the table is that there were Blake Griffin and Chris Paul. They had some spats last year, but Doc Rivers brings that Ubuntu mentality on the court, so they'll be able to get along very well. And overall, I just think that it's the Clippers' year. They know the Lakers are gonna have a very rough year. They want to take advantage this year.
Yeah, good mix in the West. Good group of teams out there. Joey, I got to get at you real quick. Basketball guy. No mention of Danny Green or Kawhi Leonard. Come on.
I mean, I don't want to know. There are no names,
no names. No names. No, we'll save this for another day because I don't want to get out of character on live television, Joey. But Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green are very established players that
I'll give you that.
are going to. No, I have the last word. I'm the host. You stay right there. Before we wrap up, I just want to touch on sleeper teams. We talked about the teams that are going to be at the top of the conferences. Jess, real quick, who's your sleeper team for the year?
My sleeper team this year is the Washington Wizards. John Wall came back from injury last year. He had a great second half, arguably top 5 point guard in the league. He put up 21 points per game, 8 assists per game, great percentages, a lot of free throws too. Bradley Beal, at the beginning of the year, he wasn't playing very well, but as he got to know Wall when he came back, they put up a 500 record together in the East, which is going to be more than enough to make the playoffs this year. Unfortunately, Emeka Okafor got hurt. He's a big part of their front line, but they also signed Al Harrington, who can pair with Nene to give them a good inside-out game. And they were actually, people might not know this, but they were a top 5 defensive team last year, and that's always an extremely important part to win the regular season and also the playoffs. So I think they'll have a great year.
Wizards, keep an eye on them. Joe, who you got?
Casey, I think this is the first year in the post-LeBron era the Cleveland Cavs are going to make the playoffs. And these are two things I'm banking on. One, Kyrie Irving is going to get in there in the conversation as one of the top 3 point guards in the entire league. That's one. Number two, they picked up Andrew Bynum in the offseason. Now, is he going to play? Who knows? But if he does, that team's going to be lethal down low. They have Anderson Varejao coming back. Him and Bynum tagged up in the post with Kyrie Irving. They have second-year man Dion Waiters coming back as his sophomore year. He's one of the, although he's like a hot and cold guy, when he's hot, he's hot. He gets really streaky, but when he's on that streak, he's real good. They picked up Anthony Bennett with their first overall pick. A lot of people question that pick. Is he going to turn out to be the best player, best rookie this year? I think he's out there to prove something. With those two young guys coming in, Waiters and Bennett, as well as the improvement of Kyrie Irving, because I really do believe nobody talks about Kyrie Irving because he plays for Cleveland. If this guy played for Boston, or LA, or in Miami, he'd be mentioned as one of the top 3 point guards. I think this is going to be his breakout year because he does have a better team overall.
Well, we'll see how that shakes out in Cleveland. Kyrie, definitely one of the top players since he's entered the league. Been real interesting to watch his career, see how he hops up, see if you're right, see if this is his breakout year this year. Guys, thanks for joining me. That's it for NBA. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with JMS and UMass Athletics.
The UMass Minutemen hockey team went into Saturday night's game with a 1-2 record, eyeing their second straight home victory against the Michigan State Spartans. The first period was tough and hard-hitting, and the Spartans' offense put a lot of pressure on UMass with 14 shots over UMass's 9. The Michigan State Spartans led 1-0 early on, and eventually ended the first period 2-1 over UMass, with goals scored by Michael Ferrantino and Greg Wolf. The UMass Minutemen came back in the second period with not 1, not 2, but 3 power play goals to take the lead 4-2, and eventually finishing the game 5-2 over the Michigan State Spartans. In the post-game press conference, both teams displayed their frustrations with their first period of play.
Scrums, we could have had maybe 2 or 3 more goals in the first period from scrums that he came up big, and we only walked away with a 1-goal lead. And then they took advantage and pulled all the momentum in their favor after the second period with all those power play goals.
Whether coach had to say anything or not, like when you get in the locker room, you know how the period went. You know if it's good, you know if it's bad, and we all knew we didn't have a good period, and if we wanted to come back and win hockey, and we had to come out on the ice with some fire, and I think we did that.
This is the Adamo Zone with UMass Sports Weekly, signing off.
And welcome back to UMass Sports Weekly. Now joining me for our, I think it's becoming infamous, I think it's fair to say, and my personal favorite segment, UMass Athletics with JMS, Jesse Mayfield Sheehan. Now, a lot to cover. I don't know if we have all the time to cover it. We had some squawkers today that didn't let us get to UMass Athletics, but we're going to cover what we can. Start off, we missed last week, first of all, which is kind of big. A lot happened.
Yeah.
A lot happened.
Yeah,
we'll get to that, but a lot did happen. To start with hockey, started off the season 0-2. Making us a little worried to start off the year. Lost to BU, lost to UML. 2 reasonable losses, not tough ones, not expected wins. But we followed that up with sweeping Michigan State, which is always good when you can beat the Big Ten for the Hockey East. What did you see within these games, and what do you see out of this team so far this season?
Yeah. Well, like you said, Casey, with those first 2 losses, not the most disappointing losses, as they were to some pretty tough teams with BU and UMass Lowell, 2 pretty highly ranked teams at the time that they played them. So not the most disappointing losses. What I saw with the wins against Michigan State was a pretty really strong performances from UMass. Steve Mastlers looked really good and really consistent. He got 31 saves in both games. Didn't give up too many goals. Only gave up 3 goals over those 2 games. And in terms of the offense really came out in both those games. We saw the first line really come out and do what it's always done. In that first game, Brandon Graysell came out and scored 2 goals. He looks to be on pace to become the leading scorer once again. But what the real surprise was in the second game, the second line of Ray Pagozzi, Steven Iacobellis, and Troy Power really came out in that game and provided a lot of offense for that team. You got 2 goals from Iacobellis and Power and 3 assists from Pagozzi. That's a really good thing to see from your second line, particularly when that second line has got 2 freshmen on it. So that second line is showing a lot of promise, and that team showed a lot of good stuff on the power play. 3 power play goals in that game.
Impressive.
So yeah, they're showing a lot of promise in a lot of different areas in that Michigan State game. It may not have been against a ranked team, it may not have been an upset, but this was a really strong performance for the team. A really great way to turn around after opening with 2 losses, being able to sweep a team like Michigan State, and strong performances all around for the team, and it looks really good going forward.
Yeah, 2-2 surprisingly is a pretty good record right now to have in the Hockey East. We've seen some upsets and just stuff we really weren't expecting to happen at the beginning of the year, with a team like UML coming in ranked number 1, now 1-3. Just stuff we're not really expecting to see. So 2 big wins over Michigan State. Let's hope they continue to progress and Master Liz keep playing the way he's playing. Got to touch on football now. Last week, we lost to Buffalo, but as I mentioned earlier, we also missed our show last week, and therefore didn't get to cover football from 2 weeks ago. Now, would you like to tell our viewers, Jesse, what happened those 2 weeks ago for the football team?
Well, 2 weeks ago, they took on Miami of Ohio. Now, you may recall in our last show, I did not have the most positive outlook going into that game. I predicted that they would lose. I really hope nobody took my advice and bet against UMass, because UMass came out and defeated Miami of Ohio 17-10 to get their first win of the season. So hopefully I didn't cost anyone any money with that game. If so, I'm sorry. But no, it was definitely a positive for UMass getting that first win. It's definitely a big sigh of relief for the team, I think, because now they don't have the burden of, oh my gosh, are we going to end the season winless?
Yep.
But what I saw was, I think you see the potential of the offense when the potential of the team when the offense actually steps up. Against a weaker defensive team like Miami of Ohio, because we've always said the defense looks strong early on in the game, but when the offense doesn't provide for them, the wheels sort of come off and they end up giving up a lot of points. But in this game, the offense stepped up. It had some particularly long drives for them and put up a couple of scores for them, and that really gave some energy to the defense. It gave them some momentum to them, and you could really tell in the game when the team would put up a score, all of a sudden the defense would come out with a lot of momentum. They might get a sack or 2 on the next ensuing drive, and it really just showed, particularly on the scoreboard, only 10 points given up to Miami of Ohio. Granted, Miami of Ohio is not the strongest offensive team, but they could have put up more points. They could have easily, given up some more points had there not been as strong a performance, had they not forced so many turnovers on the team, had they not, produced the performance that they produced. It was a really good put out by the UMass defense on that game, and really shows the potential they have if their offense shows up. Unfortunately, against Buffalo, that did not happen. The team did not score a single touchdown. The offense gave up a safety. It really just was more of what we've seen towards the rest of the season. Doyle, again, sort of an kind of performance, completed only half his passes.
I think that goes to your point for the defense, where it's really hard for the defense to be inspired when there's not a lead to defend. You're just out there hoping it doesn't get more and hoping it doesn't get piled on. When you don't have that lead to defend, it's really hard to be inspired as a defense.
Exactly. They shut out Buffalo for the first quarter of that game, which we've been seeing a lot of. They come out strong early, and then the wheels just sort of came off. UMass did not provide any support on offense, and then Buffalo came out and kept scoring more and more as the game went on, ultimately giving up 14 points in the fourth quarter to put the final dagger in, and giving up a total of 32 points in the game. The team, so when the offense doesn't show up, the defense is not able to play to its full potential, and it's ultimately costly for the team.
Now, looking forward to this week, optimism is back up there. I don't know where yours stands, because as you said with Miami of Ohio, you didn't have the best outlook, and look what happened. But once again, Vegas is on our side. We are up against Western Michigan this Saturday, and we're favorited. How do you see this one going?
Well, Casey, I'd like to think I've learned my lesson from the Miami of Ohio game. I think I might actually be favoring UMass in this game because, once again, it's a weaker defensive team. Western Michigan has actually given up more, while Western Michigan is a slightly better offensive team than UMass, kind of like the rest of the NCAA. Their defense is slightly weaker. They've given up about 37 points a game this season, which sort of is a big factor behind their being winless this season. And I think when UMass takes on a defense that has struggled this much this season, they have a chance to put together more substantial drives. Put a couple of scores on the board, give the defense a little more time to rest and a little more of something to fight behind, a little more of a score to defend. And I think we'll be able to see a much better performance on the defense. Something. They'll be able to show more of their potential, and I think the team just sort of, when that happens, the team just sort of builds on itself, gives itself some momentum to run with. When that happens, the football actually has the potential to win, and I think it can in this game.
Jesse, if we pick up the loss after you predict a win, and we had just picked up the win after you predict the loss, this whole football segment might get cut out. We might stop the predictions. We might get you out of here.
We're going to have to get somebody else if that happens.
Because then people are going to start losing money on Vegas, and it's just going to spiral downward and get really bad for some people. And, we don't know if we want that to happen here. Just to wrap up, want to get over touch on the field hockey team real quick with their performance over the weekend. Swept. And in that period, they outscored their opponent 16-2. What did you see in this ridiculous performance?
Well, first, just because we're covering some of the stuff we missed in the past week. In the week before this past weekend, the weekend before, while UMass football was getting its first win, on that same day, UMass was defeating their first conference opponent, St. Louis, by a score of 11-0. For the most goals in a game since 1979. So UMass has kind of been running over its conference opponents since the start of conference play. So far, they've scored a total of 27 goals in the 3 games. So they're averaging about 9 goals per game since they started conference play. What this says to me is that UMass is in the wrong conference. What it is sort of, UMass and Richmond are, sort of the Class A teams in the Atlantic 10. VCU is sort of it's a decent team. It's not quite in the same class as UMass and Richmond, but it's a fairly decent team. And then the rest of the teams just can't keep up. And it shows on the scoreboard. I said, you've got scores of 11-0, 7-1, 9-1, and at the end of the game, and in these games, they're just not fun for either team, really. If UMass is looking for a team to move up a conference, field hockey really, is a team that deserves to be moved up a conference, because by the time they get to the NCAA tournament, they've been facing all these teams they've just been destroying, and they're not quite prepared to face some of the top teams that they face in NCAA play. I will say this, though. They're taking on Richmond this coming weekend, and if there's going to be a game that you're going to look forward to in terms of Atlantic 10 field hockey, it's going to be UMass against Richmond, because these are two teams. These are two of the toughest teams in the Atlantic 10. Richmond is not ranked as UMass is, so hasn't had as strong a season as UMass, but they're definitely one of the tougher teams in the Atlantic 10. Slightly stronger defensive stats-wise. They've averaged less than They've averaged less than 1 goal allowed per game. So, a stronger offensive team in UMass versus a stronger defensive team in Richmond could make for quite the interesting matchup. So if you're going to watch one Atlantic 10 matchup in field hockey this season, that's the one I'd go for.
Yeah, this is definitely a game that Richmond would love to win. A-10 rival that's ranked while they're not. So
it's two teams that have been exchanging the A-10 championship in this sport for past I don't even know how many years, so it's definitely a rivalry to look out for.
Got yourself a good battle. Hopefully UMass comes out on top, as usual, as we've been pretty accustomed to seeing in field hockey lately, so we'll hope that keeps rolling on. Jesse, as always, thanks for joining me. And thank you for joining at home. Make sure to check us out on Instagram and Twitter at UM Sports Weekly. Also check out our Facebook page where you can follow up on episodes and segments. And until next week, we'll see you same time, same place.